Oklahoma City. It's great to be back here. I hope you're enjoying the convention. I'm Mark A. Altman, showrunner of Pandora, writer-producer for The Librarians, and co-host of Inglorious Trexperts. I'm here with my fellow Trexperts, the associate producer of the Star Trek Motion Picture Director's Edition, Darren Doctorman, and the writer of Thor and X-Men First Class and co-host of Inglorious Trexperts, Ashley Edwin Miller.
Whatever you've heard, it's all wrong.
And today, we are so delighted. We've never had the honor and the joy of interviewing our next guest. You all know him very, very well. He truly is a man who needs no introduction. It's George Takei.
Suddenly it's silent.
We want to ask you.
Well, first of all, I want to say good morning and thank you all very much. This is my first time back here in Oklahoma City since I remember they had built a memorial to all the people who perished in the Alfred P. Murrah building. The chairs that were lined up. It was very moving, but even before that, I was here shortly after the horrific bombing, where there was just a chain link fence around the site. And I was so touched by these stuffed animals that had been tied onto the chain link fence. Because there was a kindergarten, as I'm told, in the building. 19 children perished, together with over 150 people there. Extremism is terrorism, and it was a horrible thing that happened. And I do remember my 2 visits here, which dealt with, which was memorable because of the tragedy of the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building. But this is a happier occasion. Hopefully, all together, gathering together to celebrate a show that is still young, 58 years young, and we have more children now. All the spin-offs are not only our children, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And this is such a blessing because of all of you. Those of you that supported Star Trek when we first came on, who became very devoted, absolutely relentless in your support of Star Trek. And just like the series, we had spin-offs and spin-offs and spin-offs. Now you are not only their next generation, but children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I recognize the original fans here. It's easy to tell. There you are, right in the front row. Thank you very much, and you have a lot of generations that followed you. Thank you very much for your incredible. We had the Vulcan greeting on Star Trek, live long and prosper. Well, we have lived long and prospered together. So for that, thank
you so much. Walter, I wanted to ask you, in 1967, you made a movie, The Green Berets, with John Wayne, who was the biggest movie star.
Did you say 67?
68. 66.
Lower.
65.
When did Star Trek first begin?
66.
That's right.
And you did it on the hiatus.
During the hiatus between the first and second season. That was in the 60s, not 50s.
I didn't say 66. 67.
67.
The hiatus between 67 and the second season.
Right.
So my question for you is this. John Wayne was probably the biggest movie star in the world at the time. Politically, the complete antithesis of yourself. How was that relationship? Because you have some wonderful scenes together and you're terrific. Obviously, he's a magnetic presence, whatever we think of his politics, but what was that experience like for you? Obviously, it's a huge budget, Warner Brothers 7 Arts at the time. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience was and your impressions of the Duke?
Well, I was a John Wayne fan from when I was a child, and when my agent told me that he wanted to interview me for his upcoming picture, The Green Berets, about the Vietnam War, I was both thrilled and apprehensive. Thrilled because it was John Wayne. I remember seeing his great big close-up in Fort Apache and how he squinted at Ward Bond. I mean, he was, you know, a giant in motion pictures. And he wanted to see me in person for this upcoming movie, The Green Berets. I walked in with a decision that I had made. It's about the Vietnam War. He was a supporter, a passionate supporter of the Vietnam War, and I was active in the peace movement. We had a Hollywood peace organization called Entertainment Industry for Peace and Justice, EIPJ. And so I worked together with people like Jane Fonda and David Sutherland, other actors like that. I was going to be interviewed by a passionate supporter of the Vietnam War. I had a decision to make. That decision was, I'm going to be honest with them. I am a strong supporter of peace in Vietnam. And I decided I'm going to confess to him that we are on opposite ends on that war. I walked in and sat down, shook hands, and I saw that same giant close-up is squinting at Ward Bond, but he was squinting at me. I knew he was suspicious. And I said, Mr. Wayne, I mean, you know, you don't call John Wayne John when you first meet him. I said, Mr. Wayne, I'm very honored to meet you in person like this, and because I respect you and the integrity of your position, I have to tell you that I'm on the opposite end of the Vietnam War. I am a member of the EIPJ, which is in Hollywood known as the Hollywood Peace Organization, and we are working just as passionately as you are in supporting the war. We are working to end the war and get peace in Vietnam. There was silence. I said, well, I said my piece. It's up to him. I waited. He kept squinting at me, that Ward Bond squint. And so that made me feel pretty good. He sees me like Ward Bond. And then he said, you know what, George, I respect you too. And I think I have to honor you for your integrity in being forthright with me. And let me tell you, what I want for this role is the best actor I can find. I'll be interviewing a few others, and we'll let you know. But I want you to know that you have my respect for being so forthright. I walked out of there thinking, I'm not going to get the part. The next day, my agent called me and said, George, you're cast in Green Berets. And my respect for John Wayne grew even more. He cast me despite the fact that I would be spending the money that he was going to be paying me to support the peace movement. And working with him was an unbelievable experience. he was not supposed to be the director. The press release said Mervyn LeRoy was to be the director. And I had worked with Mervyn LeRoy in another film, The Majority of One, with Alec Guinness and Rosalind Russell. And so I was prepared to work with Mervyn LeRoy. Mervyn was there. He sat in the canvas seat for him, but on the set, giving orders and whispering with the cameraman and pointing things out, was John Wayne. John Wayne took over the director's job. He was a takeover kind of guy. And when we were ready to work, we had a script. I forget the name of the writer, but he was making up the scene. He said, David Jansen was also in that. David, you're seated there, and you say your line, and you get up and go there. And George, say such and such, and go there, and then say, seated, this line, and then I'll walk out. That wasn't in the script at all. We had to memorize the new lines right there on the set at Fort Benning. Thank God it was Fort Benning. When they said on location, I thought, good Lord. Do I want to go there? Fortunately, it was at Fort Benning where they had built a Vietnam village set. And so there in Georgia, we were filming The Green Berets. And John Wayne is a big star in every way. He took over the directing job, the writing job, and the producer's job as well, because the man who was given the credit for producing was Michael Wayne, his son. So you know who was doing the producing as well. John Wayne is a takeover guy.
Yeah. It's such a great cast. You mentioned David Jansen, Aldo Ray is in it, Jim Hutton's in it. Great ensemble. What people may not realize after you told that story about that, giving you lines on the day and changing things, it was the reason that you missed so many episodes in the second season of Star Trek, because Green Berets went on and on. It was a quagmire, to steal a phrase.
Literally a quagmire, because we started shooting one scene outdoors, and it started to rain. And John Wayne said, all right, we can't shoot in the rain. We'll stop filming. The prediction is it's going to be over in a week. And so we all went to our bungalows there in, what's that town right by Fort Benning? Columbus, Georgia. And it came, the rain came and it continued, and then it got more intense, and then it became a drenching rain. A week passed, and it was still raining, and it continued to rain. We were supposed to be back on the set by then. It went on for literally, it felt like 40 days and 40 nights. We got way behind schedule. And so John Wayne said, I'm going to be decisive. We're going to make that a rain scene. And so we slogged through the mud, drenching wet, and we couldn't run because it was too difficult to run. And so we slogged through that. But 2 days into the shoot, it stopped. Bright sunshine, but we had mud all over. The set was all wet. And so he decided, all right, we're going to continue filming as a rain scene in bright sunshine. And so before every shot, we had to be doused with buckets of water so that we were drenching wet. They would wet down the set, and about a half a dozen prop people would stand out of camera range with garden hoses, faking rain. and we went way over schedule, and that's how I missed out on about 4 episodes of Star Trek the second season.
But you got to be a captain. You were Captain Nim in Green Berets.
Even before Starfleet made me a captain.
Well, before that, you had such a, you've had this amazing career as a voiceover artist. For decades. People may not realize you got your start doing voiceover. I think it was on Rodan and Godzilla, dubbing Godzilla and Rodan back in the day. And of course, your voiceover career continues to this day. Can you tell us a little bit about getting your start in voiceovers, and if that's a different muscle, what do you get out of it that you don't necessarily get, on camera, but just you've had so much success in the voiceover arena. Ever since those early days dubbing those Japanese kaiju movies.
Well, I got my career inspiration way before I was getting paid. I spent 4 years of my childhood in American imprisonment camps because of the Second World War. As you know, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, which began the United States' involvement in the Second World War. And we're Japanese Americans, we're Americans, but we look just like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And the nation went crazy, hysterical, totally irrational. My parents couldn't walk down the sidewalk without cars passing by, yelling at them, calling them filthy names, calling them spies and saboteurs. We had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, but just because we looked like this, the racists were yelling at us. And then the graffiti started to pop up. Japanese American-owned businesses got graffitied. My father's car had 3 letters painted on it in red paint, JAP, that venomous hate word. And then the government got stampeded by that kind of racism. They came down with a curfew. All Japanese Americans had to be home by 8 p.m. and stay home until 6 a.m. That was okay with me. I was 5 years old, so we were in bed. But if any Japanese American were caught outside at night, they were arrested and thrown into jail. With no evidence, no charge, nothing. Simply because we looked like this and they were breaking a stupid curfew. And then my father went to the bank the next morning and to make a deposit, and the bank account was frozen. Frozen means the money's gone. The government took what we had in the banks. Some families lost their entire life savings just because of racism and war hysteria. And then even the President of the United States got stampeded by all that hysteria, and on February 19th signed Executive Order 9066, which ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, from Seattle all the way down to the Mexican border, to be rounded up with no charge, no trial, no due process, no evidence and no facts, other than that we looked like this. And they categorized us as enemy alien. We weren't aliens. My mother was born in Sacramento, California. My father was a San Franciscan. That's the US. My siblings and I, the 3 of us, were born in Los Angeles. That's the US. But they categorized us as alien, and to top it all, enemy. All Japanese Americans were enemy aliens simply because we looked like this, and we were put in barbed wire prison camps. However, in camp, there were black tar paper barracks that we had to live in. I went to school in a dark, black tar paper barrack, and the teacher on the first day said, "I'm going to teach you the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag." And she pointed to the flag at the head of our class, and she said, "We will begin every day in the morning with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag." So I remember 5-year-old me standing on my 2 feet by my desk with my hand over my chest saying, "With liberty and justice for all." But right outside my schoolhouse window, I could see the barbed wire fence and the sentry tower and the machine guns pointed down at us. But in addition to those outrages, every other month, after dinner in the mess hall, they showed movies, old Hollywood movies. I remember seeing Charles Lawton in the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He was a fantastic actor. I really was moved by the anguish of this hunchback. But occasionally they showed Japanese movies that had been imported before the war. And some of them were samurai movies. And they either were silent movies or they had lost a soundtrack. When they showed those movies, they had a man who, say there's a screen there, and to the left-hand bottom, seated at a table, and the table had empty coconut shells and iron triangles dangling, and pipes and all that. And when the sword fight began, he had a boy there running the pipe through the triangles, the clang, clang, clang. And when the horses, samurai on horses came, the coconut shells became the horse hooves. But the man who sat with them either had memorized the dialogue, he had a script in front of him, but he was looking at this screen, and he synchronized with the Japanese actor's lip movement. And I still remember how fascinating that was. There'd be a scene between the shogun, the great lord, and his samurai, the warrior, and beside him was a princess. And the shogun, the great lord, would say, and the samurai would say, "Ha, so de gozaimasu." And the princess would go, "Ma, osoroshii koto." All these voices coming from one man seated right there beside that screen. I was riveted on him more than on the movie on the screen. And when the movie was over, I said, "Daddy, my father was with me. I said, "Daddy, that man was like a magician." And he said, "No, in Japan, they have narrators like this at kabuki and other performances, and they're called benshi." I memorized that name because it was that word, because it was such a fascinating thing for me. And then after we got nothing from the outside world in imprisonment, no newspapers, no radio, nothing. When we were released at the end of the war, my father bought a little portable radio for us, and then my world expanded. Gangbusters, Manhattan, New York City, sirens going, all sounds, and the whole drama being played out by voice actors or westerns, horses clopping. And I was used to the sound of horses clopping because I heard the coconut shells being, and the cowboy would come galloping, and I saw westerns, I heard westerns. So that was all voice acting, radio acting. That's where I became fascinated by the potential for just the human voice to dramatize, to move you, to take you from a barbed wire prison camp to ancient Japan, samurai period, or from my portable radio, gangbusters, or B-Bar-B and the Western, or the B-Bar-B Riders on radio. So I got my inspiration as a child from voice actors who opened up a new audible world for me by their voices.
Well, I have to, going back to the internment camps, you shined a light more than anyone on such a dark chapter in American history, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention you had your Broadway play, which you wrote and starred in, graphic novels, children's books, all bringing this history to people who maybe weren't aware or were, but couldn't understand, and you brought your unique experience to a much broader world, and that's so important because when people don't know history, the fact that you used your stature and your stardom to bring this, because it's not just writing about it in your memoir, you have continued to make this something that people understand and can empathize and be horrified by, and I think that is just a remarkable thing that you've done with your stardom, and the fact that you continue to talk about it and that you're not bitter about it, but you're saying it so people, this doesn't happen again, and we've seen the dangers of this, and I think it's just remarkable, and George, I think that's an incredible legacy.
Well, thank you very much for that.
I know you had another star that you wanted to ask George about.
Yes, on a much lighter note. Now, John Wayne and the Green Berets is not the only experience you've had with a major star and a war movie. What I've been dying to ask you about is Which Way to the Front with Jerry Lewis.
When, well, it took some, what's the word? My father wanted me to be an architect. And I did start my college life as an architecture student up at UC Berkeley. But as I told you, from the time I was a child, I was fascinated by acting. I wanted to be an actor. It was voice acting that first introduced me to the power as well as the magic of voice acting. But I had discussions with my father, and he said, "Yeah, being interested in theater and movies and motion pictures and television enriches your life, and so that's good." But I used to drop hints to my father that that might be an interesting way to make a living. He said no. That's culture, and it's good to have culture in your life. But even white actors don't work all the time. In fact, very few actors make it a career. It's a tough road. And so I think architecture is much more stable. It'll be much more satisfying for you. And I think he also had his own agenda. He was in real estate by that time. And I think he pictured putting a sign, Takei and Son Real Estate Development. And I would design the projects, he would develop them and sell them. And so that was, he never said that, but I think that's what he had in mind. So, as a good son, I began my college studies as an architecture major. But after the second semester, I came back to Los Angeles from Berkeley, and there was an ad in the Japanese American press for some producer casting Japanese voices. What's a Japanese voice? You have a white voice? Your hair and mustache is, or beard is white.
I'm not so sure about that.
It sounds like a white voice to me. But this producer was looking for Japanese voices. My father saw that ad, and so he said, "You're a ham, why don't you, you don't have a summer job, look into that." So I found out about it, auditioned, and I got cast. It was dubbing in Japanese voices to a Japanese sci-fi monster movie called Rodan, a prehistoric monster that gets released by radiation and terrorizes the massive hordes of Tokyo. And this producer was importing that film and wanted to dub in English dialogue to the actors speaking in Japanese. And I auditioned for it. And as my father said, I was a ham, so I knew how to scream like the terrified hordes of Tokyo. And I got cast, and they hired either 4 or 5 actors. I can't remember. One of them was Ki Luke, the Chinese American actor, and he was impressive. I noticed how he took some words, he broke up into 2 sounds, and he'd take a breath where the actor kind of seemed to break, and then finish with the second syllable of that word. And so by watching these others who worked with me, I was able to do, I think, a half a dozen voices on Rodan. If you should ever see that on TV on the late night, listen for my young voice.
That's an extremely difficult skill.
Yeah, but I did it, and it worked, and it was fun, and I even helped the writer find a word. There was one scene where the police captain is bawling out one of his underlings, and he says in Japanese, "Bakayaro," stupid fool, you know. And the writers couldn't find any English word that fit that lip movement, "Bakayaro." And the director asked the cast to take a crack at it. And I watched that scene. It's on a loop, so you see it over and over again. And I watched that lip movement, and I said to the director, "I think I have a possibility, and let me try it." And the loop came, and when the captains started to speak, I said, "Banana oil." It fit. Banana oil for Bakayaro.
Well, George, I know a source of much consternation for you over the years was the scene in Star Trek II which announced your captaincy, and that was never...
You read my autobiography.
Well, you know we did, but I have good
For
news
those of you that don't know, it's called To the Stars. It was published in 1994.
But we just happen to have the scene right here. We have sides for you, so we can finally tell everyone.
How did you get this?
We have our ways.
I'm gonna have to put my glasses on.
Brad, I need my glasses.
Sorry, Brad. He's about to get a promotion.
My reading glasses.
From one almond to another, let me get your glasses.
Quickly, Brad, there are thousands of lies at stake. We even have the music for the scene, and we're going to set the stage, and it's going to be wonderful. And finally, your promotion will be made in history. There's your glasses right there.
He's going off the book.
They're a gift from Brad Altman. They will be again. That's the beauty of it.
It's been decades since I looked at this line, or lines.
So we're going to start with scene 29 in interior space shuttle. I'll read the screen directions and any other characters that may be in there, but we would love for you to read your lines when they come up. Here we go. Everyone ready? Yeah. Here we go. A new deposit. Sulu, Uhura, and Kirk, who sits reading. Through the windows, we can see the approach to the Starship Enterprise. Kirk looks up, nods. Sulu activates a comm button.
Enterprise, this is Admiral Kirk's party on final approach.
Enterprise welcomes you. Prepare for docking. Kirk looks up from his book as Sulu sits next to him. I really must thank you.
I am delighted. Any chance to go aboard the Enterprise, however briefly, is always an excuse for nostalgia.
I cut your new orders personally. By the end of the month, you'll have your first command, USS Excelsior.
Thank you, sir. I've looked forward to this for a long time.
You've earned it, but I'm still grateful to have you at the helm for 3 weeks. I don't believe these kids can steer.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The captain of the Excelsior.
we have a time for just a few questions, so if you want to line up at the mic, we know you must have a lot of questions.
He's no fisticuffs.
How did you dig this up?
We
I
found-
thought
we
Bill
found
had
a way.
worked every page of this script.
We found a way.
You have magical ways.
That's why we're the true experts. Go ahead.
Hi there. I just want to know when you're signing autographs for fans, like what is the most common quote that gets requested, and if you could deliver it for us.
A common quote that they ask. A common quote is, there's so many unique ones. They're either children asking for their fathers. The father was a big fan, and my mind's a blank now.
I think he may be trolling for that Howard Stern quote that you're immortalized for.
Thank you for that hint. Oh my. I was thinking of what the children want for their fathers, who was the big fan, and it's both the daughter and son asking for them.
My question is, outside of Star Trek, what's your favorite role, and is there any chance you'll ever return to Star Trek?
For the latter part of your question, it's hardly likely. Some of you may have seen me walking with a cane. I don't walk like I used to. I don't sound like I used to. If it's of Admiral Sulu in retirement, speaking nostalgically about his youth, then I can be cast.
I bet if we put a sword in your hand, you would remember.
If you're trying to get me to take my shirt off, forget that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. This is less of a question and more of a thank you. The very first Star Trek convention I went to was in Oklahoma City at a hotel. I was maybe 18, 19 years old, and it was the weekend following when Gene Roddenberry died. And you were there, and you didn't sign autographs, but you shook hands with everybody as they left, and it is, what a first experience, what a very personal, and I wanted to thank you for your professionalism in showing up and, you know, continuing to be able to share the love that we all had when it was a very difficult time for you. And it's been a lot of years, but thank you.
Thank you for remembering that. I remember that convention well too. And as you said, I initially wanted to cancel. I mean, all of us, beyond the Roddenberry family, the members of the cast were grief-stricken. He was the one that created this incredible phenomenon, and it was already a phenomenon by then. It was to grow even larger, but and Gene personally became a very dear and beloved friend, and so it was very painful to consider coming to a convention where, you know, it's a joyous occasion, people coming together and celebrating Star Trek and the memory of Roddenberry would have just filled me with grief. But I phoned a couple of friends, and the organizers said that was Adam Malin. It was a creation convention, and he suggested that I do the convention as a tribute, and I thought maybe that might be an even more positive way rather than staying home and grieving. And I came here, and he was so right, because it wasn't just us that were grieving. The fans who had never met him, who had never worked with him, who had never shared friendship with him, were grieving just as much. And it was an opportunity for all of us to come together, and rather than my just talking, and you might have noticed I love talking, I shared the mic with the people there, and to listen to their memories of Gene helped make that convention not only memorable, but a renewal of Gene Roddenberry's spirit. Thank you for remembering that.
Hi, George. My question is about your appearance on Twilight Zone. I think you're fantastic in it. It's a small set. You and one other actor the entire episode. You really ratchet up the intensity. My question is, where was the line between George the entertainer and George the person when you portrayed that character? Because his actions are very different from the actions that you and your family took. The character realizes his father was a traitor, for example. Was that difficult for you? Would you have portrayed the ending of that episode any differently if you had more creative control?
I have mixed feelings about that episode. It was, as an actor, very fulfilling. It was a rich, raw, red meat acting opportunity for me to sink my teeth into. And it's Rod Serling's show. It wasn't written by him, but you know, it was science fiction. And yes, it was a different story of the same impact from the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But I did it because it was also science fiction. There was one episode that had Bill Shatner on the wings of a flying plane talking to a passenger through the window. I mean, it's science fiction, you know, science, not science, it was just anti-science fiction. And that's the kind of show it was. And it certainly wasn't my family's experience. It was fantasy fiction. And yet, it was still too close to the end of the Second World War for other Japanese Americans. And we have a Japanese American civil rights organization, sort of like the NAACP, but this is called the Japanese American Citizens League, JACL. And they protested the show because it defamed Japanese Americans, the interpretation. It was science fiction, totally unbelievable. And yet, it was, it touched a raw nerve for many Japanese Americans, and their protest pushed CBS to cancel any further airing of that episode. So throughout the run of Twilight Zone, it was never repeated. And only when videos started coming out was it available again for fans to see. And so I want to emphasize that was science fiction, not the truth. It was fantastical. The character that I played visualized his father signaling the Japanese planes to go that way to hit Pearl Harbor. Absolute fantasy, and it was Twilight Zone. It was fiction. And that was a measure of the sensitivity and the horrible impact Pearl Harbor had on so many Japanese Americans.
Well, I'm afraid we only have time for one more question, but George will be at his booth, so it's a good time for anybody who didn't get to ask a question to talk to him, get his autograph. And I want to remind you at the very end, if you haven't been to GalaxyCon before, and chances are you haven't, since this is the first one in Oklahoma City, they do a group selfie. So they would want you to come to the front and by the bottom of the stage, and George will be standing there and take a giant picture of everyone. So last question.
Yeah, your voice work tends to run a really high range of very silly roles like Adventure Time, and then more recently very serious roles like Arakawa in the Like a Dragon video game. Do you have a preference, or is it fun to just have that really high range and go from being a gangster to being a weird talking heart?
Well, have you seen Blue-Eyed Samurai?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Some of you saw it. Not too many. Thank you, those of you that clapped. That was another fulfilling role. One of the lords in this kingdom during the samurai period of Japanese history. So yes, I've had a wonderful range from sci-fi to historic fantasy. And voice acting, as I said a little bit earlier, is drama created by voice, but now it's drawings and the combination of voice acting and the drawings. And I must say, Blue-Eyed Samurai was beautifully drawn. Some of them are like Japanese prints, block prints that are very artful, and now we have that as animated storytelling of samurai period. I enjoyed doing that very much, and I'm sorry you haven't got it yet. It is going to be rerun. And the other speaker mentioned my books. I have a new children's picture book that just came out earlier this month. It's called My Lost Freedom, and it's my childhood imprisonment in American concentration camps, told from a child's vantage point. In 2019, my graphic memoir of that, which is targeting the teenage generation, came out called, they called us enemy. As I said in my talk, the enemy was totally irrational and totally racist.
Well, we're happy to call you friend. We're happy to call you friend.
What a treat this has been.
And thank you so much.
Live long and prosper.
As Mark said before, this is the first time we've gotten to interview you. Maybe next time we do this, you can have your answers longer and more thought out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, everybody.
Remember, come forward for the selfie. Please, no stage diving. No stage diving.
Okay, everyone, if you can see this camera right here, I can see you. On the count of three, ready? 1, 2, 3.